You're not lazy, you're on autopilot. And there's a big difference. Most people walk around blaming themselves. They say, I'm lazy. I don't have discipline. I don't have motivation. But that's not the truth. The truth is far more dangerous and far more hopeful at the same time. You are not broken. You see, success is not an accident, and failure is not an accident either. Both are programmed results. The real question is, who is programming your life? If you wake up every day at the same time, scroll the same phone, think the same thoughts, complain about the same problems, delay the same dreams, and promise yourself tomorrow, that's not laziness. That's conditioning. That's habit. That's autopilot. And autopilot doesn't ask for your permission. It runs in the background. Just like a plane set to a destination, your habits are taking you somewhere. The problem is not that you are not moving. The problem is that you are moving in a direction you never consciously chose. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. If your system is distraction, delay, doubt, and comfort, then your results will reflect that. Not because you are lazy, but because your daily pattern is stronger than your occasional inspiration. Motivation is powerful, yes, but motivation without structure is like a car without a steering wheel. It makes noise, but it doesn't go far. Let me explain something important. Every action you repeat becomes easier, not because it requires less effort, but because your brain builds a pathway for it. If you repeat procrastination, you become efficient at procrastinating. If you repeat discipline, you become efficient at discipline. So when you say, I just don't feel like doing it, understand this. That feeling is not truth. It's programming. Autopilot is built through repetition. And here's the educational part. Because life rewards the educated mind, your subconscious mind does not judge. It does not argue. It simply accepts what you give it repeatedly. If you give it excuses, it builds comfort. If you give it challenge, it builds strength. Most people don't need more ambition. They need interruption. You don't need to work 20 hours a day. You need to interrupt the pattern. The moment you become aware of your autopilot, you regain control. Awareness is the beginning of transformation. Think about this. When you learned to drive, you were fully conscious. Every movement required focus. But after practice, you could drive while thinking about other things. Why? Because repetition created automatic behavior. Your life is now being driven the same way. The question is, who trained the driver? If your past trained your habits, then your future will pay the price. Unless you decide to retrain, and retraining does not require emotion, it requires decision. They simply install different defaults. They wake up, and their default is growth. They face difficulty, and their default is action. Not because they were born different, but because they practice different responses. You see, laziness is a label. Autopilot is a mechanism. Labels make you feel helpless. Mechanisms give you leverage. If you're lazy, there's nothing to fix. If you're programmed, you can reprogram. And here's where personal responsibility enters the conversation. You cannot blame your environment forever. Yes, your surroundings matter. Yes, your past shaped you. But at some point, you must become the architect of your future. You cannot live on yesterday's settings and expect tomorrow's success. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is direction. Small disciplines repeated daily create massive transformation. Not dramatic effort, not emotional speeches, not temporary hype. Simple, consistent correction of your daily pattern. If you want to break autopilot, start small. Wake up 30 minutes earlier. Read 10 pages a day. Walk 20 minutes. Write your goals down every morning. You are not trying to interrupt the default, because once you interrupt, you insert choice. And once you insert choice, you insert power. Here's another truth. Comfort is addictive. Autopilot loves comfort. It avoids risk. It avoids embarrassment. It avoids growth. But growth lives in discomfort. The reason you feel resistance when you try to improve is not because you are incapable. It is because your system is defending familiarity. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar possibility. But let me tell you something powerful. The cost of staying the same is far greater than the cost of change. 5 years from now, you will either thank yourself or question yourself. And that outcome will not be determined by motivation. It will be determined by daily habits. You must become intentional. Intentional about what you watch. Intentional about who you listen to. Intentional about how you speak to yourself. Your internal dialogue programs your external results. If you constantly say, I can't, your subconscious says, understood. If you say, I'm learning, it says, let's build. The language you use becomes the life you experience. Now here is the empowering part. If autopilot was built by repetition, it can be rebuilt by repetition. The same force that created your limitations can create your freedom. The same mind that built excuses can build excellence. You are not stuck. You are trained. And training can be changed. Success is not about intensity. It is about being perfect. It is about being persistent. When you choose one disciplined action today, you are not just completing a task. You are rewriting code. One decision at a time. One habit at a time. One disciplined moment at a time. And eventually, the new behavior becomes automatic. Imagine waking up and your default is productivity. Imagine facing fear and your default is courage. Imagine seeing opportunity and your default is action. That is not fantasy. That is training. You are not lazy. You are on autopilot, but autopilot can be redirected. The steering wheel is awareness. The fuel is discipline. The destination is your decision. So starting today, stop attacking yourself. Stop labeling yourself. Stop waiting for motivation. Instead, examine your system. Ask yourself, what am I repeating? What am I tolerating? What am I feeding my mind? Because whatever you repeat, you peak. And whatever you tolerate, you teach yourself to accept. You have incredible potential, but potential without structure remains dormant. Install better habits. Install better standards. And over time, you will look back and realize something powerful. You were never lazy. You were simply operating on a program you never consciously chose. Now you know. And once you know, you are responsible. Design your days carefully. Invest in yourself daily. Because the life you want is not built in grand moments of inspiration. It is built in quiet, repeated decisions, made long before anyone applauds. Take control of your programming. Interrupt the autopilot. And set a new destination. Your future is not waiting for motivation. It is waiting for a decision. The greatest transformation in your life will not begin with action. It will begin with awareness. Most people are trying to fix their behavior without first understanding their behavior. They say, I need more discipline. I need more motivation. I need more energy. But they never stop to study the system that is already running your life. And until you study the system, you cannot improve the system. Education begins with observation. If you truly want to understand why you feel lazy, you must examine your daily patterns like a scientist. What time do you wake up? What is the first thing you touch? Your goals or your phone? What thoughts dominate your morning? Do you start your day with intention or reaction? Because here's the truth. Repetition builds identity. If every day begins with distraction, your mind learns distraction. If every challenge is met with delay, your mind learns delay. You are not deciding in those moments. You are replaying. And the brain loves efficiency. It does not care whether the habit is good or bad. It cares whether it is repeated. The more you repeat something, the less energy it requires. That is why procrastination feels easy. That is why scrolling feels natural. That is why comfort feels automatic. It is not weakness. It is wiring. Now here is where education changes everything. When you understand that your brain is simply following pathways built by repetition, you stop attacking yourself. Instead of saying, I'm lazy, you begin to say, I've trained myself into this pattern. But retraining begins with awareness. Awareness means you catch yourself in the act. You notice when you reach for distraction. You notice when you say, I'll do it later. You notice when you avoid discomfort. That noticing, that small moment of consciousness, is power. Most people live unconsciously. They wake up, react, consume, complain, sleep, and repeat. Years pass this way. Dreams shrink this way. Potential living requires no effort. Intentional living requires courage. And courage begins when you pause. You see, education is not just reading books. Education is understanding cause and effect in your own life. If you sleep late, you wake up tired. If you delay action, you feel guilty. If you feel guilty, you avoid responsibility. And the cycle continues. That is autopilot. But once you trace the chain, you gain leverage. If one small decision at night changes the morning, and the morning changes the day, and the day changes the week, then you realize something extraordinary. You don't need massive change. You need strategic interruption. Let me teach you something practical. For 7 days, observe yourself without judgment. Write down how you spend your time. Write down your emotional triggers. Write down the excuses that appear in your mind. You will start to see patterns, and patterns are predictable. If every afternoon you feel low energy and turn to distraction, that is not random. That is a programmed response. If every time you feel fear about a new opportunity, you suddenly feel too tired, that is not laziness. That is avoidance disguised as fatigue. The human mind is brilliant at protecting comfort, but comfort is expensive. The cost of unconscious living is invisible at first. It shows up slowly: missed opportunities, average results, regret disguised as it is what it is. Naders the picture, everything changes. Because awareness gives you choice. Between stimulus and response, there is a small space. In that space lies your power. Autopilot removes that space. Awareness restores it. And here is the educational principle you must understand. What gets measured gets improved. If you measure your time, you respect your time. If you measure your progress, you accelerate your progress. Most people don't fail because they are incapable. They fail because they are unclear. Clarity is power. When you become aware of your patterns, you stop blaming your personality. You stop saying, "This is just how I am." Instead, you begin asking, "What system produced this result?" That question changes everything. Because once you see life as a system, you become an architect instead of a victim. Autopilot is nothing more than yesterday's decisions repeated long enough to become invisible. Awareness makes the invisible, and once visible, it can be modified. Let me remind you, growth is uncomfortable because it interrupts familiarity. When you start observing yourself, you may not like what you see. You may notice wasted hours. You may notice negative self-talk. You may notice fear controlling decisions. Good. That discomfort is not failure. That discomfort is awakening, and awakening is the first victory. You cannot conquer what you refuse to confront. So instead of attacking yourself, instead of labeling yourself lazy, analyze your routine. Instead of wishing for motivation, build understanding. Because understanding builds strategy, and strategy beats emotion every time. If you know that your weakest moment is at night, design your night differently. If you know your phone steals your focus, change its location. If you know certain people drain your ambition, limit exposure. Awareness leads to adjustment. Adjustment leads to improvement. Improvement repeated daily becomes transformation. But none of it begins with force. It begins with noticing. The person who wins is not the one who feels the most inspired. It is the one who understands their patterns and intentionally reshapes them. You are not fighting laziness. You are fighting unconscious repetition. And the moment you shine light on repetition, it weakens. So slow down. Observe. Reflect. Ask yourself every evening, what did I repeat today? Did it move me forward or keep me familiar? What triggered distraction? What strengthened discipline? Those questions educate your mind, and an educated mind makes powerful decisions. Remember this: awareness without action is wasted, but action without awareness is blind. First, see clearly, then act deliberately. That is how you move from autopilot to authority. That is how you reclaim control. That is how you stop surviving your days and start designing them. And when you truly understand this principle, you will never again say, "I am lazy." You will say, "I am learning how to direct my own life." And that realization, that shift from blame to responsibility, is the beginning of greatness. Discipline is a system, not a feeling. Discipline is not something you wait to feel. It is something you design. Successful people remove reliance on emotion and build structured routines that make the right action easier than the wrong one. When you create systems, fixed study times, defined work blocks, planned rest, you reduce decision fatigue. Education teaches us that structure produces freedom. The more structured your key habits are, the more energy you preserve for creativity and growth. Discipline becomes automatic when the environment supports it. Environment shapes behavior. Ownment consistently. You adapt to it. If your surroundings promote distraction, you will be distracted. If your circle promotes growth, you will grow. This is not weakness. It is psychology. Change the inputs, and you change the outputs. Rearrange your workspace. Limit digital noise. Spend time with people who discuss goals instead of gossip. Environment silently programs standards. Raise the environment and you raise yourself. Small daily improvements reprogram identity. Massive success is rarely the result of massive action. It is the result of small actions repeated consistently. Read a little daily. Move your body daily. Improve one skill daily. Each repetition sends a signal to your mind. This is who I am becoming. Identity shifts through evidence when you act disciplined. Even in small ways, your self-image changes. And when identity changes, behavior follows naturally. Over time, the person who once felt stuck begins operating with clarity, confidence, and direction. Not because motivation appeared, but because repetition created a new default. Discipline is a system, not a feeling. Let me teach you something that can completely transform the way you see success. Discipline is not an emotion. It is not a personality trait. It is not something you either have or don't have. Discipline is a system, and systems can be built. Most people are waiting to feel ready. They say, when I feel motivated, I'll start. But motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls with sleep, mood, weather, and circumstances. If your success depends on how you feel, your results will always be unstable. Education teaches us a powerful principle. What is scheduled gets done. What is merely intended gets delayed. That is the difference between amateurs and professionals. An amateur waits for inspiration. A professional follows a system. When you understand that discipline is structural, not emotional, you stop arguing with your feelings. You stop negotiating with yourself every morning. You stop asking, do I feel like it? And start saying, it's time. Now let us break this down intelligently. Every day, your brain makes thousands of decisions, and every decision consumes energy. The more choices you leave open, the more exhausted your mind becomes. This is called decision fatigue. When your willpower is drained by small, unnecessary decisions, you will struggle to make strong, important ones. That is why systems are powerful. When you decide in advance what time you wake up, what time you work, when you exercise, when you study, you remove negotiation, you remove debate, you conserve mental energy for performance instead of persuasion. Autopilot once worked against you because it was built around comfort. Now you can build a new autopilot around discipline. Let me give you a simple example. If you say, I will study more, that is a wish. If you say, I will study from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. every weekday at my desk with my phone in another room, that is a system. The first depends on mood. The second depends on structure. And structure wins. Here is another educational truth. Environment is stronger than willpower. If junk food is on the table, temptation increases. If your phone is next to you while working, distraction increases. If your bed is your workspace, laziness increases. But if your workspace is clean, your tools are ready, your distractions are removed, productivity increases naturally. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your environment. So discipline begins with design. Design your mornings. Design your evenings. Design your workspace. Design your schedule. When successful people appear disciplined, what you are really seeing is preparation. They reduced friction for good habits and increased friction for bad ones. If you want to wake up early, sleep earlier. If you want to read more, place the book on your pillow. If you want to exercise, lay out your clothes the night before. These small adjustments create automatic behavior. Remember this, consistency beats intensity. You do not need extreme effort once a week. You need reasonable effort every day. A system transforms discipline from something dramatic into something normal, and normal is sustainable. Now let's talk about identity. When you follow a system repeatedly, something powerful happens. You begin to see yourself differently. You are no longer someone trying to be disciplined. You become someone who operates on structure. And identity drives behavior. If you see yourself as careless, your actions will confirm it. If you see yourself as organized, your behavior aligns with it. Systems create evidence. Evidence builds identity. That is why even small routines matter. Waking up at the same time daily sends a signal to your brain. Completing one planned task daily sends a signal. Keeping small promises to yourself sends a signal. And those signals accumulate. Over time, you don't need to push yourself as much. The system carries you. Think of a train on tracks. Once it is on the right track, it does not need constant steering. It simply moves forward. Your routine is your track. If your track is distraction, you move toward mediocrity. If your track is discipline, you move toward excellence. But here is the critical lesson. Discipline is freedom. It may feel restrictive at first. Structure may feel uncomfortable. But without structure, you become a prisoner of impulse. Impulse says scroll. Impulse says delay. Impulse says relax now and regret later. And over time, the disciplined life becks, owns the easier life, because it removes chaos. It removes constant internal conflict. When you know what must be done and you simply do it, peace replaces anxiety. So stop asking yourself, why am I not motivated? Because your results are a reflection of your design. If there is no structure, inconsistency will rule. If there is structure, progress becomes predictable. You are not lacking discipline. You are lacking a designed routine. Build a schedule that respects your energy. Break big goals into daily tasks. Track your actions. Review weekly. Adjust intelligently. This is educational growth, not emotional struggle. And understand this deeply. Small disciplines practiced daily create massive outcomes. One focused hour every day equals 365 hours a year. One book a month equals 12 books a year. 30 minutes of exercise daily transforms health in a year. Systems compound. Emotion fluctuates. Choose what compounds. The moment you stop relying on feeling and start relying on structure, everything changes. You become stable. You become predictable. You become reliable, especially to yourself. And that reliability builds confidence. So from today forward, do not chase motivation. Create a system so clear that even on your worst day, you know exactly what to do. Because success is not an act of inspiration. It is an act of organization. And once your life is organized around growth instead of comfort, you will realize something extraordinary. You were never undisciplined. You were simply unstructured. Now build the system, and let the system build you. Most people underestimate. Your environment is silently shaping your future every single day. You may believe your success depends only on willpower. You may think discipline is purely internal. But educatio, N teaches us something powerful. Behavior is heavily influenced by surroundings. You don't just act from intention. You act from exposure. If you sit in a room full of distraction, your focus weakens. If you sit in a room full of ambition, your standards rise. That is not weakness. That is human psychology. Your mind absorbs cues from what it sees repeatedly. The conversations around you influence your thinking. The content you consume influences your beliefs. The physical space you work in influences your productivity. And here is the truth. Most people are trying to change internally while living in environments that reinforce their old habits. That is like trying to stay dry in the rain without an umbrella. If your phone is always in your hand, distraction becomes normal. If negative people surround you, doubt becomes normal. Normal becomes comfortable. Comfort becomes autopilot. So when you say, I can't focus or I keep losing motivation, ask yourself a smarter question. What is my environment teaching me daily? Because environment teaches without speaking. Let's break this down logically. Your brain is constantly scanning for what is standard. If everyone around you sleeps late, you will feel comfortable sleeping late. If everyone around you avoids risk, you will feel safe avoiding risk. If nobody in your circle reads books, reading will feel unusual. But if you change the standard, you change the direction. Put yourself in a space where growth is normal, and growth stops feeling difficult. This is why successful people are intentional about exposure. They guard their inputs carefully. They choose what they watch. They choose who they listen to. They choose what conversations they engage in. Because input determines output. If you consume content that feeds fear, you will hesitate. If you consume content that feeds courage, you will act. The mind reflects what it repeatedly absorbs. Now let us make this practical and educational. Start with your physical environment. Is your workspace organized or chaotic? Clutter creates mental noise. Order creates clarity. Is your bed your office? If so, your brain associates that space with rest, not productivity. Small changes create big impact. Designate a place for work. Remove distractions from reach. Keep only what supports your goal within sight. Next, evaluate your digital environment. How many hours do you spend scrolling? What kind of messages are you repeatedly seeing? Are they educational or emotional? Productive or distracting? Your phone can either be a university or a casino. It depends on how you use it. Unfollow what weakens your focus. Subscribe to what strengthens your mind. Remember, your attention is your greatest asset. Protect it. Now, let's talk about social environment. This may be the most powerful influence of all. You become like the people you spend the most time with. Not instantly, but gradually. If your circle complains, you will complain. If your circle takes responsibility, you will take responsibility. Standards are contagious. That does not mean you abandon people. It means you elevate conversations. Instead of discussing problems, discuss solutions. Instead of discussing excuses, discuss strategies. You may not control everyone around you, but you control how much influence they have over your thinking. Limit exposure to negativity. Increase exposure to growth. Because what you tolerate becomes your standard, and standards determine destiny. Here is another educational principle. Proximity increases probability. If you are close to opportunity, your chances of growth increase. If you are close to discipline, your habits improve. If you are close to ambition, your vision expands. Put yourself near people who challenge you, not comfort you. Comfort keeps you average. Challenge pulls you upward. But understand this carefully. Changing your environment does not always require moving cities or changing careers. Sometimes it requires simple adjustments. Wake up 1 hour earlier before the world interrupts you. Turn off notifications during deep work. Join online communities focused on learning. Listen to audiobooks while commuting. Small shifts in exposure create major shifts in identity, and identity shapes action. If you consistently place yourself in environments where growth is normal, you will begin to see growth as part of who you are. The opposite is also true. If you remain in environments where mediocrity is accepted, you will subconsciously lower your standards. You cannot expect exceptional results in an average atmosphere. You must intentionally upgrade your surroundings, because environment either supports your discipline or sabotages it. And remember this, willpower is limited. Environment is constant. If you rely only on willpower, you will eventually break. If you design your environment wisely, you reduce the need for willpower, make good habits easier, make bad habits harder. Put the book on your desk, put junk food out of reach, put your alarm across the room. These are not small actions, they are strategic decisions. You are engineering your future, and when you begin to see life through this lens, you stop blaming yourself for every setback. Instead, you ask, what needs to change around me to support who I want to become? That question is powerful, because once you take responsibility for your environment, you take control of your direction. You are not lazy, you are influenced, and influence can be redesigned. Create spaces that inspire focus. Build circles that elevate standards. Consume content that expands vision. Do this consistently, and something extraordinary will happen. Discipline will feel natural. Growth will feel normal. Progress will feel expected, not because you suddenly became stronger, but because you became smarter. You changed the environment, and when the environment changes, behavior follows. That is how you move from autopilot to intentional living. Design what surrounds you, and you will redesign what defines you. That will remove pressure from your life immediately. You do not need a dramatic breakthrough to change your future. You need small, repeated improvements. Most people overestimate what they can do in one day and underestimate what they can do in 1 year. They want transformation overnight. They want massive results quickly. And when they don't see immediate change, they quit. Then they call themselves lazy. But success is not explosive. It is incremental. And incremental progress is powerful because it compounds. Let us understand this clearly and logically. Every action you take casts a vote for the type of person you are becoming. Not one action, but repeated actions. If you read 10 pages today, you cast a vote for being a learner. If you exercise 20 minutes today, you cast a vote for being disciplined. If you complete one important task before distractions, you cast a vote for being focused. One vote does not change identity, but thousands of votes do. Identity is not what you declare. Identity is what you repeatedly demonstrate. This is why small improvements matter more than dramatic efforts. When you attempt extreme change, you rely on emotion. When you commit to small change, you rely on consistency. Consistency wins. Now, here is the educational principle behind this. The brain adapts to repetition. The more frequently you perform an action, the stronger the neural pathway becomes. Over time, what once required effort becomes automatic. That is how bad habits formed. If you can automate distraction, you can automate discipline. But it begins small. Read for 10 minutes, wake up 15 minutes earlier. Plan your day the night before. Save a small amount of money consistently. Practice one skill daily. You are not trying to impress anyone. You are trying to reprogram yourself. Because here is the truth. Autopilot is simply accumulated repetition. You didn't become stuck in one day. You became stuck through small, unnoticed decisions repeated daily. The same principle works in reverse. Small improvements repeated daily create unstoppable momentum. Imagine improving just 1% every day. It sounds insignificant, but over time, 1% compounds into massive growth. A small daily workout turns into strength. A small daily reading habit turns into knowledge. A small daily discipline turns into confidence. And confidence changes posture. Posture changes action. Action changes results. It all begins small. The mistake most people make is waiting to feel ready for big change. But readiness grows through small wins. When you complete a small task you promised yourself, you build trust. And self-trust is power. If you constantly break promises to yourself, your confidence weakens. You begin to doubt your own commitments. But when you keep even tiny promises, you strengthen your internal credibility. You begin to say, if I say I will do it, I do it. That statement alone separates average from exceptional. Now let's talk about momentum. Momentum is not created by intensity. It is created by consistency. If you work hard for 3 days and stop for 5, momentum dies. If you work moderately for 30 days without stopping, momentum builds. And once momentum builds, action feels easier. Think about pushing a heavy object. At first, it requires effort. But once it starts moving, keeping it moving requires less energy than starting it. That is the power of small daily improvements. The first week is the hardest. The first month requires patience. But after repetition, discipline becomes part of your identity. You no longer try to be productive. You are productive. And that shift from trying to being is everything. Let me explain something important. Your future self is built by your present habits, not by your dreams, not by your words, by your daily actions. If your daily actions are slightly better each week, your life will be dramatically different in a year. Small improvements remove overwhelm. They make growth realistic. You don't need to change your entire life this month. You need to improve your next decision. Choose water instead of soda. Choose reading instead of scrolling. Choose planning instead of reacting. Choose starting instead of postponing. Every choice is a brick. Lay enough bricks, and you build a new foundation. And here is something powerful. Small improvements protect you from burnout. When change is too extreme, it is unsustainable. But when improvement is gradual, it integrates into your lifestyle. You don't shock the system, you train the system. And training builds resilience. Over time, you will look back and notice something extraordinary. The person who once struggled to focus can now work deeply. The person who once delayed everything now completes tasks early. The person who once doubted themselves now acts with certainty. Not because of one motivational moment, but because of daily repetition. This is the educational reality of growth. What you practice daily becomes permanent. Practice excuses daily. They become permanent. So choose wisely. Stop chasing big emotional highs. Start chasing small, consistent wins. Keep a simple rule. Never miss twice. If you skip one workout, return the next day. If you miss one reading session, resume immediately. If you fall short one day, correct the next. Consistency is not perfection. It is persistence. And persistence shapes identity. You are not lazy. You are the result of what you repeatedly do. Change what you repeatedly do, and you change who you are. Small steps, daily action, consistent correction. That is how identity evolves. That is how ordinary people create extraordinary outcomes. So do not underestimate small progress. Protect it. Repeat it. Trust it, because the life you want is not built in dramatic leaps. It is built in quiet improvements, practiced long enough to become who you are.